Well, good morning. Man, it's good to hear you guys. It's good to see you guys. So, I don't know if you've ever been at a place where you think you're in control, but you're not, right? Like you think that you're kind of doing your thing the way you want because you want, but in the reality, there's something totally else that's influencing what's going on, right? Have you felt like that at some point? Yeah, some of you guys are like, yeah, I'm married. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Right? Yeah, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you think you're in control, you think you're in charge, you think you're making your own choices, but the reality is there's something else there that is influencing what is going on. I mean, for example, okay, we're gonna play a little game here. It's gonna go well. Don't freak out. I can already see you're nervous. It's gonna be fine. You're like, Pastor Paul's gone, Aaron's upstage. What's gonna happen? It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. But like my daughter and my wife and I, we do this little thing where one of us will say, I love you. And the other one, like not to be outdone, will be like, well, I love you. You've been watching us. Okay, good. Okay, right? It's a little creepy. You know what I'm talking, right? Okay, yeah. But then, right, to kind of up that, the other one's like, well, there's something, you know, it's not just more, like I love you. And so then we'll say I love you, and then we'll say I love you more, and then the last one will be I love you. Right, that's it, most. Yeah, you got it. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. That last word you just said, the third word, I want you to spell it here in a moment, and this isn't like a trick, just spell it, right? And spell it 5 times as fast as you can. So I'll count to 3, you'll say it, all right? You'll spell it out 5 times as fast as you can. It's gonna be really easy. So again, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, I love you more, I love you. Right, that word right there, okay, most, right? You're gonna say it, right, three, I'm gonna count to 3. You're gonna spell it 5 times as fast as you can, just get it out. If you're young and can't spell, you know, your mom will explain it later. All right, all right, here we go, ready? And 1, 2, 3, M-O-S-T, 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 M-O-S. What do you put in toaster? No, you put bread in toaster. You people are weird. Like, I don't know what you're doing here in New York, all right? Okay. Bread goes in a toaster, toast comes out. This is not the bread you're looking for. Like some of you are like, that was weird, I'm leaving. What just happened? Right? No, what just happened is you were primed, right? You were making a free choice, right? You were saying a free thing. You made that choice on your own, but you weren't in charge, right? Like I was, which doesn't happen much, so I'll take it when I can, right? And so, right, this happens to us all the time. All the time, we think that we're sort of making our own choices, and we are. We have the free will to make our own choices, but there's something going on around us. Things are influencing us to make the choices that we do. That's happening everywhere we go. Every time you watch TV, especially every time you go, right, into a grocery store. Right, those are like a psychologist's dream, okay? Everything that is going on there is basically happening to make you spend more money, right? That is what's going on there. You know that. You walk into Target, you get there, you know, you're like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on. Like, they're like, you have a problem. And you're like, I know, right? You know what I'm right? You go in and everything is set up in a way to make you think in a certain mode. This is what happens. As soon as you walk in, right? You go into Wegmans, you go to any other grocery store most of the time. As soon as you walk in, what's right to the right? You see flowers, right? Immediately there's flowers. No one actually buys those, right? Have you ever, like, it just doesn't happen that often. There's a very small percentage of people that are going to a grocery store thinking, I should buy flowers, right? But what happens is you see those flowers and immediately your mind starts thinking, oh, those look fresh. Those look good. And as you walk through the store and you buy stuff that is like wrapped in plastic, you think, I bet this is fresh. This looks good. It's immediately primed you to act a certain way. This happens the way we buy medicine. It has been scientifically proven that the color on the front of the box of the medicine makes you decide how well you think it will work. And you've heard of the placebo effect right? Placebo effect is when someone says, I have a headache, and you give them a Tic Tac instead of an aspirin and they feel better, right? Like that's basically what's going on. This happens with the color of the pills that we take. 1996, they did a study. They gave people placebo pills. There was nothing in them that should affect them in any way. And they told them, these pills should make you sleepy. These are sleeping pills. It should sort of relax you and knock you out. For the people that took pills that were colored blue, green, or purple, 67% of them said that they felt like they were falling asleep after taking the pill. They're just like, oh yeah, what's in that pill? Oh yeah, that was great, you know, but if the pill was red, orange, or yellow, only 20% of the people felt like they were falling asleep. The other 80% were like, I don't know what's going on, but that didn't work at all, right? Actually, I feel like I have more energy. Why? Because in our culture, we sort of associate blues and greens and purples with nighttime, with falling asleep, right? You take your NyQuil, what color is it? You take your ZzzQuil, what color is it? You take your DayQuil, what color is it, right? If they flip that, it would mess us all up. Because there are influences in our lives that are sort of shaping and shifting and moving, and we think we're in control. We think we're in charge. We think that the choices that we make are just because we want to make them, and this is what's going to happen. And we think that not only we get to choose our choices, but we get to choose our consequences to those choices. And what happens is this starts to breed a sort of pride in ourselves. We think that we have arrived where we're at simply because we have pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps, right? That I've worked hard and I've done the right things the right way, and life has just worked out, not because of luck, not because of other people, not because of some sort of divine influence, but because I have done what I'm supposed to do and I've gotten where I've gotten because of me. And we sort of cling to this, thinking that we're in charge, that we're in control, and that we have gotten ourselves to the place that we are on our own. And there's a guy that we're about to talk about who is in this very place. We're going to move into this next passage in Daniel. And it's a new king that has been set up. The one we talk about is Belshazzar. We had Nebuchadnezzar earlier. Dr. Wayne Schmidt talked about him. And Nebuchadnezzar has died. And there's been all kinds of weird sort of political games. Like things are happening. People are dying. This guy's killed. And there's all kinds of guys that are trying to take the throne. I won't bore you with all their names. But we sort of get through those. And then eventually a king gets put into place who's there. But he doesn't really want to be the king, right? He's there. He wants kind of the power, but doesn't want the responsibility. So he sort of advocates the responsibility to this guy named Belshazzar, who happens to be the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. And Belshazzar sort of inherits the power, inherits the throne, and all of the benefits that come with that. And he is pretty proud of himself. He is sort of that stereotypical, spoiled, rich kid that can do what he wants because he wants, doesn't care about people, just cares about sort of getting his and getting what he wants. And that's what's going on. And so we know that this party that he's about to throw is in the midst of one of the worst times that he could have done it. Babylon, as a culture, is about to be taken over. The Medes and the Persians are sort of eating their way through the rest of the nation. It is the strongest kingdom in the known world, and they are at the doorstep of Babylon. They are waiting. Cyrus is waiting to take over everything. And so what does rich Belshazzar decide he should do in the midst of this climactic battle that's about to happen? Throw a party, right? Because of course he does. It's like, let's eat, drink, and be merry. We're going to be fine. We're going to gorge ourselves. Everything's going to be okay. And so the passage that we're about to read right now coincides. That's what's happening. The battle has come to Babylon, and instead of fighting, the active ruler in the city at that time is throwing a party. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to it. And Daniel, if you don't, it should be in your bulletin or your program. There should be two passages. We're going to start with the first one, and we're going to kind of chunk that one out. I'm not going to read it all one time. We're going to do little pieces at a time and explain it. If you don't have either of those, you can get it on your phone or it's up on the screen. So here's where it starts. And Daniel, it says, King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for thousands of his nobles, and they drank wine with him. And while Belshazzar was drinking his wine, some of your translations may say tasting his wine, right? But we know that is not what's going on, okay? He's not like some sort of wine connoisseur, right, who's drinking it and spitting in a bucket, okay? That is not what is happening at this party, okay? He is drinking wine after wine after wine, right? He is getting his. And so it says he gave orders in the midst of this to bring the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so the king and his nobles and his wives and his concubines might drink from them. All right, so what's going on? He is throwing a party of all parties. All right, he is getting trashed, right? There are historical records of kings during this era that basically one of them said every day for a party they slaughtered 1,000 animals. All right, and PETA was in the back of the signs protesting the entire time. Right, it was an absolute mess. And I mean, he is just doing anything again. They're slaughtering animals. They're drinking gallons upon gallons of wine. They're gorging themselves on food. It says all of the wives and the concubines there. Basically, he is having a wild sex party in the middle of the most crucial battle of his kingdom. And basically what he's saying is, look, this is what I want to do. I've gotten myself to this point. I should be able to do what I want to do because I want to do it. If it makes me feel good and I want to do it and it shows a certain status in my life, that's what I'm going to do. Does that sound like any value system that you've heard before? If it makes you feel good, if you want to do it, and if it shows that you have a certain status, do it. Grab for the gusto. Eat, drink, and be merry as much as you can now, because who knows what tomorrow brings, other than a hangover. And that's what's going on right at this moment. And then he decides, how can I make this worse? You see, the Babylonians, when they would take over a culture, what they wanted to show is that they were stronger than that culture, and they wanted to show that their gods were better than the god of whatever culture they took over. So when Nebuchadnezzar, when they go in and they take over Babylon, when Babylon takes over Jerusalem, they ransack the temple, the place where God was supposed to have resided. And they take all of the goblets, all of the gold, all of the silver, all of the plates, anything that had been used in sacred worship for the God of the Israelites, the Babylonians took and they desecrated it. And it was them basically shaking their fist at not only the Jewish culture, but the God that they served and saying, look, we are stronger than you are. Our gods are stronger, bigger, and better than yours is. We can do whatever we want. We are powerful enough. We have brought us to this place on our own. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar thinks. He thinks that he has brought himself to this place on his own, by himself, through his own wisdom, through his own strength, through his own military strategy. And so they take everything out and they bring it to Babylon. Now, eventually what happens, and Dr. Wayne Schmidt talked about this last week, eventually what happens is Nebuchadnezzar realizes that this God of the Israelites is a little more powerful than he thinks. And so what I sense he did is he took all of these goblets, all of this sacred material, and he sort of stored it away. And now his grandson, Belshazzar, wants to show how big he is, how powerful he is. He basically wants to worship himself and his gods that he has made out of his own pride. And he shakes his fist at the God of the Jews. And he says, I can do whatever I want. And so they bring him in. And the next passage, it says like this: they brought the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. And the kings and his nobles and his wives and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and of silver, of bronze and of iron, of wood and of stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal place. So in the midst of their revelry, in the midst of their drinking, in the midst of their partying, in their midst there, I'm going to do mine and I'm going to get mine and that's the way this is going to, in the midst of all of that, something super weird happens, right? They are praising the gods of the objects that they have created themselves in their own image, right? That's basically what idolatry is, as we start to worship things that bring us pleasure. We start worship things that bring us value. And basically we worship ourselves by looking at other things. When we worship an idol, we're basically looking in the mirror and worshiping self. And he says, this is the God of stone and the God of gold and the God of silver. These are the gods that made Babylon. And not only Babylon, but the reason he is so relaxed about the fact that a battle's about to happen is because in the midst of this battle, right in the middle, separating Babylon from the Medes and the Persians is a wall. A wall made of bronze, a wall made of stone, a wall made of wood, a wall made of all the things that they're worshiping. They think their safety has been created by themselves. They become content. They become lazy. They think that they can protect themselves because they've gotten themselves to this point. And that wall in Babylon, there's lots of historians that have written about it. The basic number that keeps floating around is it was about 40 feet high. And the thickness has gone exaggerated different times. Some go as far as 87 to 90 feet. We're not sure that it was that thick, but we know for certain it was wide enough that you could race chariots around it on the top. People guess somewhere between 30 and 50 feet thick, with massive gates and inner walls. They knew that there was no way that anyone could get through something they had built. And I think most of us here today know the passage. After pride comes a fall, right? When we are so turned inwardly that we think we're the ones in control, when we are so turned inward that we think we're the ones in charge, and we start to shake our fist at God, and we turn our back at his instruction, we are setting ourselves up for failure every time. And in the midst of their drunkenness, in the midst of their party, in the midst of their craziness, a hand shows up and starts writing on the wall. This is where we get the phrase, right? I can see the writing on the wall. This biblical passage is where that sort of colloquial phrase has come from. And what happens is dude freaks out. He looks up and he sees this thing on the wall and he recognizes there is something out of his control. And it says, as the hand wrote and the king watched, his face turned pale. He was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. Listen, maybe you can understand this if you, maybe like me, as I have admitted before, are a slight, possibly a little bit, not, all the way, it could be worse, but control freak, all right? Like that. Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm your friend. I too am a control freak. I like to know what's going on. Whatever happens in my life, I immediately start researching. Are there any people like that? Like immediately. Whatever's going on, I immediately go to the internet because the internet would never lie to me, right? I go to Google. Right? I start, right? If I start to cough and feel a pain in my chest, immediately I go on WebMD and I try to see what's wrong with me, right? And it's always either a heart attack, a stroke, or cancer. I don't know why, but that's always what it is, right? When you go on WebMD, it's always like, oh, it could be the flu, or you could have a stroke. It's unbelievable, right? But I need to know the information because if I know the information, somehow I can trick myself into thinking I'm controlling the situation. And eventually what happens is something outside of your understanding happens. This is what's going on with these guys. When something happens outside the box of your reality, you have two options. You can either deny that that thing is happening, or you can expand your box of reality to say, look, there's something that maybe is bigger than me that I didn't understand. And what he's got to decide that he's going to do is he's got to figure out whether or not he thinks he can control this hand or not. And when he realizes that he can't, I love the way it literally says his back, right? His back and kidneys start to go soft. You know what happens when your back and your kidneys go soft? Yeah, you guys can talk about it later. You know what happens, right? And then he gets so scared that his knees start to shake. He is petrified, horrified, stupefied, terrified, any other fied you can come up with, right? With the realization that perhaps something has shown up in his life that he can't control, that he can't take care of. And so what does he do? He immediately calls people that he thinks can help him control the situation. Get the astrologers, get the theologians, get the philosophers, right? Get my guys down here, my council, and they can explain to me what's going on. And as this hand is writing on the wall, they're looking at it, and he's starting to feel confident again. His boys are here. He's brought his posse down. They're going to tell me what's going on. We're all going to laugh about this and keep drinking. And they tell him, I don't know. And scripture says he repeats the process again, right? He freaks out again. He doesn't know what to do because he's convinced that if he just keeps doing things the same way, everything's going to be fine, right? He's convinced that the empire that he is living in, the kingdom that he has built, is the only one that truly needs worshiped, the only one that truly matters. And he's at the head. He's the guy. He is it. He has the power, the prestige, and the position to do whatever he wants. Why isn't this hand listening to me? And if not me, at least my wise men. And then it says the queen comes down. Now, the guess is this is actually the queen mother, either Nebuchadnezzar's wife or his daughter-in-law. So she can walk in and talk, right? Moms can come in and talk in ways other people can't, amen? You know, that's just truth. And his mom comes in and she says, look, you know, there was this guy. It says he served your father, Nebuchadnezzar, but really there it means your successor, your ancestor, someone who is a part of your line. It says he served Nebuchadnezzar, and his name's Daniel. You should call him because I think he could tell you what's going on. Now, this is about 70 years after Jerusalem has been ransacked. So Daniel is not a teenager anymore, right? Daniel's an 80-year-old man who is sort of known to the kingdom, but has sort of been put on the back burner. He lives his life. He's got some influence, but obviously Belshazzar doesn't know who he is. He says, yeah. He goes, look, if he can do it, I'll put a purple robe on him. I'll put a gold chain on his neck. I will make him third in power, right? Because the original king is number one. Belshazzar, who's in power, is number two. I will give him third in command if he can tell me what's going on. Call him down. And so Daniel comes down. And this is what he tells him. He says, Your Majesty, the most high God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because the high position he gave him, all of the nations of peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those that he wanted to spare, he spared. Those that he wanted to promote or to lift up, he lifted up. Those he wanted to humble or to bring down, he brought down. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from the people and given the mind of an animal. We talked about this last week. He lived with the wild donkeys, he ate grass like the ox, and his body was drenched with the dew in heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets them over them anyone he wishes. But you, Belshazzar, his son, his descendant, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You have taken the goblets from his temple. You've had them brought to you, and your nobles and your wives and your concubines drank wine from them. You praise the gods of silver and of gold and of bronze and of iron and of wood and of stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you do not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and your ways. He says, you have become so arrogant. You have become so prideful that you have turned and you have shaken your fist at God, thinking that you can do whatever you want whenever you want because you want. And Daniel says, you want to know the words? I can tell you the words. These are the words. Are you ready? Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Yep. Yeah, me too. That's about the response I have when I read it the first time. Now, when we talked about this in staff meeting, Pastor Stacy said, it sounds like Teletubby names. She's like, I think this. She's like, what is going on? Right? We're in the same place. And he goes, let me tell you what this means. In essence, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found lacking. Because you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not bright enough, you're not strategic enough to pull this off on your own. And the moment that you think that you are is the moment you fail. And he says that last word, it means that your entire kingdom is going to be divided among other people, and you're not going to rule anymore. And it happened that night. That night, the walls were breached. The Medes and the Persians came in, and Nebuchadnezzar, who was drunk and hung over, was killed. An evil man with evil intentions who refused to turn to God, who used and abused people, justice was served. You see, what we see throughout this entire theme of the book of Daniel is that there are times when it seems that evil is winning, that darkness has overcome us, that life is going on in a way that we don't understand, that we can't comprehend, and we're frustrated and we're angry. And you look around and it seems to be that evil men and bad people are being promoted and good people with good intentions are being punished. And we have this stuff going on in our lives when I think a lot of times it brings us to fear. In fear, we start to try to figure out how can we fix this on our own, right? And we keep trying to do stuff that will fix it. And if we have learned nothing from history, because history tells us every time you try to do stuff on your own, every time a culture or a kingdom tries to figure out ways, every time people try to do things over and over, the same thing happens. Eventually they fail and they are destroyed by somebody else who's more power hungry. Every time. You guys know, right, what the definition of insanity is, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. This is how I feel when I'm talking to my daughter. Baby, you got to tie your shoes. Yes, they have to be on before we leave the house. And I say it the same way every time, every day for the last 4.5 years, and it never changes. And I wonder sometimes if that's how God feels with our cultures. And how many times out of fear and out of pride, we turn away and we shake our fists at a God who loves us and wants to be in right relationship with us and wants to bring justice to the world. That's one of the themes of Daniel, that eventually evil will not win, that darkness will be defeated, that God's justice and love and mercy, that God will show up and right the wrongs. But in the midst of all the crazy of life, it's really difficult to see that. It is really difficult to understand how in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our frustration, as we watch evil prevail, how on earth is God going to be able to do something about this? And we start to grab for control, and our own pride and fear make us start to grab for everything that we can do on our own, because what happens is we don't trust God as much as we thought we did. And one of the phrases that I've used throughout Sharon and I's cancer journey with her diagnosis, when people would ask us, how are you dealing with this? One of my responses would be, look, I know that God is a good driver, but sometimes it feels like he's asleep at the wheel. You ever felt like that? And what happens? We try to grab the wheel. And we try to take control. And we start to think that we're the reason this is working or not. And throughout the book of Daniel, we see, listen, God will show up. In the midst of the darkness, the light will shine through. Here in a moment, we're going to take communion together. And truly, this act of communion, as we participate and celebrate what could truly be seen as one of the darkest moments in history, right? The death of the Son of God. If you're one of the disciples hanging out around this time, and the guy that you just followed for the last 3 to 4 years, the one that you thought the Messiah is killed, this is not a good day for you. But God is in charge. And God can use these moments of darkness, of dread and despair, and his light will shine forth. justice will happen. Good will win. Love will overcome. God will reign. And right now, it feels like we're living between the pool of these two worlds. Eventually, the kingdom of God will show up. Our usher's going to come, and they're going to serve us the elements. I'd ask you to take one if you consider yourself a Christ follower today. Just a little piece of bread and a cup. And as you take it, I want you to start thinking about in your own life. Maybe where the places in life where that sin of pride and control or the fear of what's going on has just gripped you. And maybe you've been like the king. We're going to get what we can now. Maybe you've turned your back on God, or maybe you've just looked at him and shook your fist. But as we take these here in a moment, and I'd ask you to hold them as you take them until the end, maybe you want to pray, want to reflect, want to think that even in the midst of the darkness, the light will shine. God is in charge, no matter what we are experiencing here today.